All right, so what we have here are multiple different frameworks that we've come up based on the research and conversations that we've had. And I'm going to ask the wonderful folks who put their heads together to think about what this new framework could actually look like, who could explain it. And we'll begin with Jamal.
So this first one is the tree of learning, and it starts with, like all trees, it has to get all of its sustenance from trust, motivation, and experimentation. And then the trunk of the tree is the standards and assessment and the curriculum and instruction, and both of those are fed by the learning environment and the professional development that teachers and staff would get. And then the branches of the tree are where we include the things that students would learn and skills they'd be able to do, such as critical thinking, life and career skills, information, media, and technology, communication, collaboration, core subjects, and creativity. And our next framework is a little different. It's the center of the framework is the student, of course, and it's the student there is surrounded by the instructional core, the content, student, and teacher. And between the student and teacher, you have to have trust. And then between the teacher and content and student and content, you have to have motivation and experimentation as part of the equation. And once all those things happen at the core, you're surrounded by the core subjects, which allow access to life and career skills, information, media, and technology skills, learning and information skills. And all around all of that, wrapped up in that, is the way that we monitor and deliver and help to facilitate that learning that's going on in the middle. And that's through professional development, a strong learning environment, having good, well thought out standards and assessment, and a curriculum and instruction plan. And that's it for these two frameworks.
Thanks, Joelle. I'll talk about the next two. So this one is a little bit around trying to imagine an environment where it's all around working in teams. And so on the left-hand side, you see the teaming task environment. And inside there's trust, motivation, and content knowledge. I always sort of struggle, like, where does the content come from? Because I think you need content as like the medium for learning, the cognitive medium. So trust, motivation, and content knowledge. And then on the outside, therefore, you have experimentation, reflection, and then failure and progress. And then on the right-hand side are sort of like, at the individual level, what are the pathways of information and like those pathways for the relational trust, knowledge, and motivation to happen? So in one, I have the student at the nexus. And so the student is building trust, motivation, and getting knowledge from teachers, content, technology, and so included in that are computers, but also like books, the community and the environment, themselves, so like the reflective practice, other kids, and then their parents and family. And for teachers, kind of a similar framework in that they're going to be doing self-reflection, but then also building that trust and motivation and knowledge with other teachers, with the community, with students, with parents, with administrators, and then also with the content and the technology. So it's not called professional development, but it's like a developmental nexus, I guess. And then the next framework, sorry, it's a little inverted, but so inside there's a triangle, but it's more of like a pyramid, and so the base of the pyramid is trust, the middle section is motivation, and they both, at the top is experimentation and failure, and right around them is reflective practice. And so teachers, the curriculum, students, and parents all sort of circle around that. And then the outside you have content mastery, innovation skills, service learning, and play, and a set of assessments that look at what's your impact, how do you apply knowledge, and what's your health and well-being. So that's kind of like how it goes.
And Matt.
Okay, so my conceptualization that we kind of normed around these prototypes, and so I was charged with maybe reconceptualize what the instructional core might look like. And so you can see I kept the three concepts of student, content, and teacher. Around the student and teacher, put a circle called mindsets, which would be where motivation, trust, and experimentation would live. and then the interactions that would occur between student and teacher and those mindsets. And then around contents and skills, I put standards, which I kind of could make the argument that standards are the mindsets of content and skills. And then tasks sit kind of in the center. And all these people interact, all these things interact in the task environment with their various mindsets and standards. And then the whole thing is the learning environment. I didn't label all those things because it's low resolution. So, you would then insert the skills and all that in these boxes if it ended up being our final prototype. I hope that kind of makes sense. And then the last one is a little more outside the box, and it basically those little circles are pieces of content that exist in the world, and students access those pieces through either intrinsic motivation because they want to, or extrinsic motivation because a facilitator that they trust introduces them to a new concept. And so basically, the idea of the environment is students gobbling up content based on kind of motivation, trust. Experimentation and failure can live somewhere in here. I wasn't sure and didn't want to go too far with the thinking so that I was too much in love with it. And then the skills would somehow attach to the content depending on the content that you would need. And so it was kind of this whole student as Pac-Man. Again, it's really a reconceptualization of the instructional core, which is kind of what I was charged to do.
All right, so we have come through a journey, and we're continuing on in our learning. We started from a place of individuals and the team coming with strong beliefs in the power of certain principles, and those have been motivation and trust and experimentation and failure. And we've had a chance to talk about how those work in tandem with one another. That work has also translated into us thinking about the 21st century frameworks, and we looked at the life and career skills, the learning and innovation skills, and the core subjects, and all of the components that make up the learning environment, and have weaved that discussion into that framework. And this is an attempt for us to take our thinking a bit further to the next step of being creative about bringing these into a new framework, a new way of thinking. So we have a few models that we will use as a basis for our discussion, and we will transition from there into our final work. But I want to start off with saying that all of these models represent some very core beliefs that I come with and that I've learned from this process. I want to just highlight the first one, and I think that having the visual of the roots of trust, motivation, experimentation really speak to the power of these three principles and the primacy of them, and how we think they're very important for learning. And just to highlight motivation once again, we could even imagine some subroots for motivation, thinking about competence and autonomy and control, thinking about the role of interest and value and relatedness as being very important even as we get to these pieces. And so I think that one is very valuable, and we'll continue to talk about the others in the group.
So what I appreciate about one that you highlighted, Brian, was that trust, motivation, and experimentation really are the roots of the learning experiences that come from that, and that you can't have critical thinking and core subjects and collaboration that are actually fostered without those things. However, I think I'm a little bit more compelled by 2 and 4, which are the models that include the concentric circles, partly because I think that as a framework, it speaks to the idea that there are layers to the system, and that these layers build upon one another. What I particularly like about 2 is that the instructional core is highlighted and at the center, with motivation, experimentation, and trust built into it. Where I would like to see us think about iterating and improving upon this is that the way in which it's currently described makes it seem, for instance, like motivation just lives between the student and the content. And I actually think that it's important for us to recognize, as we mentioned in our prior conversation, that these 3 things together are what actually create an environment that allows for learning to happen. What I like a lot about 4 is that it mentions the idea that we are addressing the whole being, the whole child or the whole adult, that we're not just speaking about that which we tend to currently assess, whether it's through our evaluation systems of standardized testing or teacher evaluations. I think that going back to the other In going back to what I would like to see, however, is in thinking about this at a system level, to me, this really represents what would be happening in a classroom. And I think about, for instance, if I was working at a State Department and really trying to create an environment where we are a learning organization, somehow representing that this obviously lives most importantly at the classroom level, but that we need to be building this at multiple layers of the system.
Thank you, Kelly. I also was attracted to a lot of the different aspects and the similar aspects between these different options, but what really jumped out to me the most was number 4. And it begins with the concentric circles and seeing the relationship and the interplay between these different areas. And there's a comprehensiveness to this particular model that isn't so built out that it becomes the definition for how to approach a certain level of the system. But it's specific enough to really get you thinking about what is most important to learning to different people. And so I see students, parents, and teachers in there. What I also might add to this is kind of just other adult learners that are involved in this particular process at the different levels. I think we capture a lot of them, but I'm thinking about district personnel. I'm thinking about others in the community that might want to or that need to be involved in this as well. The other point is about the experimentation, motivation, and trust, and how that's very explicitly defined as a triangle in the middle of these circles. You can see that trust is the basis, and I would really like to have a conversation about how we seem to be putting these in different priorities at the center of this series of circles.
Thanks, Ansel. I think just to build on that a little bit, that I think one of the things that I found really powerful about experimentation being one of our principles is that inherent to that is a reflective practice. But I think it's important to be explicit about that reflective practice, so that that's where the learning kind of happens. And so while it's only represented within the first circle in slide 4, I'm wondering how to ensure that reflective practice kind of gets built throughout the levels of the system. It doesn't just live inside the instructional core or just a school.
I like all of them have some aspects that I like. I really do like how this has experimentation, motivation. Number 4 has experimentation, motivation, and trust at the center. I also like that about number 5, how it has, the student is the learner, the teacher is the facilitator, the content and skills. I like the interaction between those all in number 5. And I like about number 6, I like the fact that it has the student gobbling up information, and it's really self-directed by the student. But when I'm thinking about all this, something Suchi said about the primacy of being a reflective practice, I think one thing we could do is maybe to alter the tree of learning by having the leaves fall and be reflective practice, and then they would compost and be sucked up into the tree through
Very
experimentation,
eco-friendly, Jamal.
motivation, and trust.
Yeah, I think I probably agree with the concentric circle. There's something about the systemic nature of a concentric circle that really resonated with me. And I think, while I like the last 2, I think as a classroom construct, I'm not sure they work as a system construct, which is where I'm landing kind of a 2 and 4. I have some thoughts on where the student should be located in that and that sort of thing, but I think probably I kind of resonated with 2 and 4 as well.